Welcome back, everybody, to our studies in political philosophy. This lesson is going to continue talking about liberalism as a political ideology, as one of the most foundational of political ideologies. Focusing in this lesson on how liberalism conceives of society. And so, essentially, what we have been doing over the last few lessons is talking about how liberalism essentially is conceiving of various different forms and aspects of political organization. So, for example, how liberalism conceives of economic development, so how liberalism conceives of society. We'll also talk about how liberalism conceives of the idea of the state, the relationship between the state and the people, the size and influence of the state within a liberal system. The previous lesson specifically looked at some of the core ideas of liberalism within political philosophy. And of course, the core ideas of liberalism are very important because they give us an idea of how we can then apply these basic core ideas of liberalism to the ways in which liberalism conducts various different parts of political organization. So, on account of the core ideas of liberalism within political philosophy, we can get an idea and an understanding of how liberalism deals with the economy and economic development, or how liberalism deals with society and social development, how liberalism interacts with the state in a meaningful way. And really, essentially, the key assumption and the foundational belief of liberalism that we are going to be speaking about is the liberal view of human nature. So, previous lesson, as you remember, we looked at things like human nature, like the economy, like egotistical individualism, all of these different sort of theoretical foundations. We noted that the liberal view of human nature is one that is a lot more positive than is conceived of in other conceptualizations. So, for example, when we look at the writings of Thomas Hobbes, we see that the idea of the state of nature, the idea of a society without a state, without the existence of the state, i.e., a society before the existence of a state, we see that according to Thomas Hobbes, this is a society that would be nasty, brutish, and short. Now, according to a liberal, it is the human nature that informs the liberal answer to the question of whether or not a society could even exist without that of the state. So, according to Hobbes, owing to the fact that there is an inherent brutal selfishness among human nature, there could not exist a society without the state. By contrast, the liberals, such as people like John Locke, take a far more optimistic viewpoint on this particular question. Specifically looking at John Locke, his view of human nature relates to a variety of different core ideas of liberalism more generally. Relates to ideas such as that of rationalism, such as that of optimistic individualism, the reason and reason as well, the idea of rationality and reason and coherence, all of which lend itself to the notion that society could indeed exist without the need for the state. In supporting this view, therefore, Locke cites the existence of what he describes as natural society. Natural society develops a number of underlying natural laws. Then, in extension of this basic principle, it is these natural laws that outline a number of natural rights, rights that are held by individuals that allow for them to conduct themselves within society more generally. So these natural rights, for example, include the right to life. There is a paramount importance that is placed on the right to own property and to have respect of your property against anybody else, such that not only does the right to property exist, but also your protection from others who seek to try and do things to take over your property. Also things like the right to happiness and all of these different things as well. What this actually means in relation to individuals is obviously a subjective question. So in answering the question of how liberals view society, it is pertinent to obviously look at the idea of a society without a state, the idea of a state of nature, and of course you can contrast that with that of people like Thomas Hobbes, and you can see that liberals accept that life before the existence of the state could be positive and optimistic. Remember, of course, we don't know what life is like without that of a state or before that of a state, and when Hobbes makes his determination in Leviathan about what life should be before the existence of a state, and he's talking about how it is nasty, brutish, and short, he is making that determination on the basis of his conceptualization of human nature. Whereas a liberal is making the same conceptualization, doing the same thing on the basis of human nature, but is coming to a much more positive and optimistic foundation and a much more positive and optimistic viewpoint. And the reason for that is because, of course, liberals have a much more optimistic view of human nature than that of people like Thomas Hobbes. Other liberals that have existed and that have written also include individuals like John Stuart Mill. Mill, by contrast, would argue that the purpose of any society should be to both facilitate and then to promote individualism. Ultimately, the foundational principle of any society is to promote freedom and liberty. And it is this general principle that informs quite a lot of John Stuart Mill's philosophy when it comes to the relationship between the people and the state. Generally speaking, it is these classical liberals that would actually be considered somewhat conservative in modern conceptualizations of political philosophy and political theory and actually political practice, in the sense that a foundational principle of any society is to promote freedom and to promote liberty. Essentially, you want to be able to promote it as so far as possible while also not infringing on the rights of individuals to be free and to have liberty and to have the right to do whatever they so choose. And so it is in that regard that there is a limited, there is the existence of a state within a basic framework of liberalism and classical liberalism, but it is limited. There is a limited existence of the state. The state should not have free rein to do whatever it so chooses in order to protect individuals' rights to property or to life or whatever, in ways that would essentially reduce the promotion of freedom and liberty. So there's a nice bit of balancing that is done in relation to the existence of the state and then by extension the size of the state in that regard, something that we will get into when looking at this in more detail in future lessons time.